Oh, so what's going on? We're talking about eyesight. There's various ways that the eye adjusts to different light intensities to protect you from, so you don't go blind. The pupil of the eye will shrink with bright light and widen with dim light, of course. And this is one of the ways that we can tell if somebody is taking drugs. They're on heroin. Let me see if this is, yeah. They're on heroin. If they've had a heroin overdose, their pupils will be pinpoint. So it's one of the ways we can tell if they've had a heroin overdose. So if we see pinpoint pupils, then we'll hit them with is it naloxone? Yeah, or something like that. Rods and cones have different thresholds. This is range fractionation. Photoreceptors will adjust their range of reaction depending on the intensity of the light. This will give the individual visual acuity despite the quality of the illumination. This is one of the reasons why at night, if you have a little bit of light, you can see fairly well, and you can almost tell colors, which is kind of odd because it's so dark. A lot of times darker cars, like dark green cars or dark blue cars, will look black in the dark. If you have a car that's, I don't know, it's orange, you might think, well, it's red, because you're not really getting enough light bouncing off of the car. But usually you're pretty good at being able to tell colors. Calcium is a major player in photoreceptor light adaptation, and for this reason, of course, we need to maintain our calcium intake. When an individual changes from one extreme light to another, it takes time to adapt to the new intensity of light. Of course, it's much easier to adapt to bright light than it is to dark light. This is because the retinol and the opsin break down at a higher rate in bright light and must regenerate to be available in the dark. Adaptation is much quicker when adjusting from dark to light because the retinal opsin level is not depleted, and for that reason you adapt to the light relatively rapidly. Color acuity is more accurate in the center of the visual field because of the fovea, because the fovea is almost exclusively cones, and for that reason, right in the middle of your visual field, your color acuity is very good. Moving out from the fovea, the number of cones decreases and the number of rods increases. Light sensitivity is most accurate about 20 degrees off center, where the concentration of rods is greatest. So when I was in the military, one of the things that they taught us to do was not to look directly at something at night if we wanted to see it, if we wanted to see the degree of light. So it's about 20 degrees, it's about right here. So if I detect a light over here, then I won't look directly at it. My best possibility of seeing that light or determining what it is to look about 20 degrees off center. And of course they train you to do that. When they're training somebody to be a sniper, one of the things that they do is they train you to look for your enemy at night. They look for your enemy by not looking directly at them. The only time you look directly at them is when you're actually scoping. The rest of the time you look to the side. You're trying to see about 20 degrees. Yeah, about 20 degrees. So you never look directly at them. It's one of the reasons why, and they developed this technique during World War I. Men would be smoking cigarettes. Well, cigarettes burn with an orange ash. So what they would do, they would shoot at orange dots at night because they were assuming that it was a cigarette. And they were very successful. Germans were especially successful. When they first started, one of the reasons that they went to cigarettes is because the cigarette burns at a much lower intensity. Actually, it's a much higher intensity, but it's much smaller. But when they first started in 1914, when the war started in 1914, a lot of men smoked pipes and a lot of men smoked cigars. And of course, the cigar is two to three times bigger than a cigarette ash, and of course a pipe is actually creates a glow. So if you've ever been in the dark and somebody was smoking a pipe, you could probably see their face because of the glow. Well, of course, it's very easy to target somebody when you can see their face. Anyway, they trained snipers to do this, and then they started smoking cigarettes, a little bit more difficult to target. And then during World War II, they during World War II, one of the things that they used to say was, you can't light 3 cigarettes off of one match. It keeps the flame going for too long a period of time to be able to light the cigarette. The third guy's cigarette. Usually it's the third guy that got shot. So, well, yeah, because he's got the match in his face. He's also, yeah. And so if there's a sniper out there and they're targeting light, the first guy and the second guy were able to light their cigarette fairly quickly, and then the third guy, of course, he was the one that leapt out in the cold. So you never, it was a death sentence to light a third cigarette off of a match, one match. About half of the primary visual cortex, V1, is devoted to the fovea. This is one of the reasons that humans are able to concentrate their spatial field on tasks close at hand, such as reading and surgery. It's because so much of our occipital lobe is taken up with interpreting what the fovea is seeing. Scotoma is a gap in the perceptual field, usually due to an injury of the visual mapping area of the brain, so it's a blow to the head. This is one of the reasons that when someone's had a concussion, that we hold fingers up. We want to make sure that they don't have impaired vision. This happens sometimes. They will lose a section of their eyesight due to the concussion. It has to do with, sometimes it has to do with swelling. And as soon as the swelling goes away, the visual impairment goes away. But of course the brain cells are very delicate, relatively delicate. And they'll swell, they try to protect themselves by swelling up and surrounding themselves with a cushion. And for that reason, of course, we get these things from time to time if somebody's had a blow to the head. Usually it has to do with an automobile accident, but it can also be due to a severe hit in a football game or whatever. People with scotoma will often compensate for their problem by allowing the part of the brain not affected by the dominant to dominate the affected area. And for that reason, they can actually see, their brain will fill in this portion, the dark portion, and of course they assume that this is what they're looking at. This is the actual picture, of course. And this is known as blind sight. So a lot of individuals that have impaired vision, they have blind spots in their vision, their brains will just fill in the gaps. And usually the gaps are correct, sometimes the gaps are incorrect. So this is not the person you want as an eyewitness. And this is known as blind sight. And of course we can create blind sight if you look at this for about 30 seconds. Not only does this part move, but this part will go away. This blind spot will go away. And your eyes will do it naturally, normally. They will fill in the gaps. Since the rest of your visual field is seeing all of these strange figures, your brain will start filling in that gray part with the same figures. Because that's the way your brain works. Your brain wants to see a complete picture. It doesn't want to see a partial picture. So it will fill things in. Now a lot of times people will start going blind and they won't even know it. And by the time they go in to see an optometrist, they're pretty far gone. We see this a lot with people with diabetes. Diabetes creates a situation where your circulation becomes poor. Once upon a time when they first invented birth control pills, it was high levels of estrogen. And the estrogen was causing the same type of problem as diabetes caused. it caused your blood vessels to become hardened, and then they would break, and you would lose portions of whatever. That's what diabetes does. It hardens your arteries, it hardens your blood vessels. Your blood vessels will harden up to the extent that they can't function anymore, and then you lose circulation in your toes, so they have to cut your toes off. You lose circulation in your leg, and they have to cut your leg off. Those kinds of things. Normally, since your arms are so close to your heart, then you don't lose your fingers and your arms, but you'll lose your toes. Your toes are usually the first things that go. But the individuals that were taking high doses of estrogen, a lot of times they were going blind. And unfortunately, because the brain tries to fill this information in, you don't realize that things are getting bad. And this is what happens with people with diabetes. It's one of the other problem with people with diabetes, remember they have poor circulation. So they have poor healing processes, especially on their extremities. So it's one of the reasons why every time somebody with diabetes goes into the hospital, they always look at their feet, because the feet are usually the first things to go. So they'll look at the feet to see if there's any wounds. A lot of times people will have an open wound that just will not heal, and it's because their immune system is depleted due to the poor circulation. But the same thing will happen with their eyesight. Their brain keeps filling things in and filling things in. They think everything's just the same as it always has been, but of course they need to go see an optometrist who looks at their blood vessels to see if any of them are broken back there. Like I showed you a picture of what it looks like. I think I did, a million years ago. Wait a minute. That's what it looks like. That's what it's supposed to look like. So that's why the doctor, whether you have diabetes or not, your doctor will always look into your eye. What he's looking at, he's looking at the blood vessels to make sure there's no breaks. To make sure there's no hemorrhaging, to make sure that these blood vessels are all nice and healthy. You can maintain your eyesight for an extended length of time, but at the same time you could lose your eyesight and not even realize that something is going wrong. It's kind of like high blood pressure. If you live with high blood pressure, you don't recognize the fact that you're having problems, because your body adapts to it, and it sees it as normal. Is there
degeneration vision? Is that what it is?
I'm sorry?
Degeneration.
Regeneration?
And the eyesight when it's torn.
Will it regenerate itself?
Mm-hmm.
Will it improve itself? No.
No?
No, hell no. You bust those blood vessels, they're gone forever. Not a whole lot we can do about it. We can reattach your retinas. It's a sheet of skin. It's what the retina looks like, a sheet of skin. And a lot of times it will detach. And just like in other cases, your brain is making up for the fact that you've got this dip in your retina. So you won't even be able to detect there's any problems until it detaches completely. And at that point you become blind in that eye. So this can be a really serious problem. My wife has a detached retina because of, not a completely detached retina, but she has a partially detached retina because of the Bradley vehicle accident that I was telling you about in Korea. She just banged her. She got banged all over the place. And now she's had 2 hips replaced. She's had her neck fused. She's had carpal tunnel surgery. And her retina is partially detached. They can go in and they can surgically reattach their retina. And usually they don't want to do that because it disturbs your vision. And it can disturb your vision for the rest of your life. It can also, but you know, if it heals, hopefully your brain will accept the healing, and then your vision will get better. But she has astigmatism anyway.
Bruce?
Yeah.
I noticed like there were some grandmas and grandpas, they had their eye surgeries, and I noticed like after their eye surgery, most of them, what they used to be doing, like weaving or silversmithing,
right,
they go right back into it for a short period, and then that's about it.
Yeah.
It's like they enjoy that last That last,
Last gasp.
yes.
Yeah. Well, sometimes, and you never know. You never know if something's going to take or something's not going to take. The reality is that normally if they keep the eye covered for an extended length of time, then it will recover completely. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to force you not to use that eye until it heals, so that when you uncover it, now it's fine, because otherwise the brain will adapt to what's going on, and sometimes it won't accept the adaptation or the change. If it's a rapid change, then sometimes it won't accept it.
Now this is science fiction. I don't know if it's real. There's a movie, several movies probably, where a donor would donate their eyes, and that person passes away, and a living person needs the eyes, and they transparent that eye. Would that work? Or?
No.
Okay.
No. No. Well, they used to say that you could see the last scene that somebody saw. But that's not real either. I mean, that's not true. No, because the part that, remember, the eye is just it's like a camera. That's all it is. It's the brain that interprets what's going on. I mean, it flips it around. Well, we're going to talk about it. I mean, one of your eyes, the inside of your eye sees that way, and the outside of your eye sees that way. And of course, in your brain, it all crosses over and puts it into a common picture. So, yeah, it's the brain that interprets all that stuff. And it flips the image upside down, and you see it as right side up. But in your brain, it flips it upside down.
Would astronauts have the same difficult effect seeing?
No, usually. Okay, so you've been on a roller coaster.
Yeah.
Okay, and you've been on a roller coaster that went.
A couple of forces.
Yeah, up. Yeah, you're shooting some G's and you're flipped upside down. But if you stop right there,
Yeah.
you can still see, and you can still recognize what you're looking at. Pilots have a problem because they can't tell if they're inverted, because they're being held inside the cockpit. And as far as their brain is concerned, everything's right side up. If they didn't think of everything as right side up, they wouldn't be able to fly, because they would be thinking they're turned upside down, and now everything's upside down.
Mm-hmm.
So they would have to readjust their brains to think that way. So they can't tell if they're inverted or not. I told you about my friend. This is the first airplane crash that I ever attended. And of course, my job was pulling the body out of it. Well, my job was accepting the body. The firemen pulled the bodies out. And it was a mess because, well, they burned. So there were two of them. One was a student pilot, and the other was the instructor pilot. The student pilot was in front, the instructor pilot was in back. But they had to pull them out, and of course they were sitting down when they died, and then the fire started, and of course, so they burned in a sitting position. So when they pulled them out, they couldn't get them out because that's really tight in there. So they didn't break anything off. That's not what I meant. What they had to do, they had it took them like 30, 40 minutes to get each of them out because they were so stiff. But when they pulled them out, of course, they scraped the skin and all their clothes were burned off of them. So, you know, they scraped their skin right down to their bones. It was pretty nasty. What we used to call, you're not going to get sick, are you? You are going to get sick. Okay. Well, we won't talk about it. Okay. But he didn't realize he was inverted. So it was a student pilot, and he didn't realize he was inverted. And so they told him to pull up. they told him to pull up, and he pulled back on the stick, but he was inverted, so when he pulled back on the stick, he actually flew right down into the ground. Okay, well that's what happened. Anyway, I won't tell you the rest of it. It gets pretty ugly. Smells just like mutton. Now you understand why I can't stand mutton. Each eye is divided into two parts: the nerves of the temporal half of the visual field, the nerves of the nasal half of the visual field. As you can see, your left eye sees one way, and your right eye sees totally different. They cross kind of in an odd sort of way. The nerves of the nasal half of the visual. Okay. As the optic nerve leaves each eye, the nerves come together in an area known as the optic chiasm. At the optic chiasm, the nasal optic nerves cross to the opposite hemisphere, and the temporal optic nerves stay on the same side. Okay, so half of your eye crosses over to the other side of your temporal lobe, and the other side stays on that side. Okay, so your right eye is not only, so when you are perceiving what's going on with your right eye, half of the information is going over here, and the other half is staying over here. So it's actually splitting, and it does the same thing with the other eye. So half of the information is on one half of the temporal lobe, and the other half is on the other half of the temporal lobe, of the optic lobe. And so now we've got four different pictures. We have half of the picture from this eye on this side of your brain, and half of it on this side of your brain, and it's the same way with the other eye. So now we have to put those four pictures together. You can imagine how complicated this is. Now you want to ask yourself, why in the world does it do that? Why doesn't this eye just go back and this eye just go back? Well, there are some animals that do that. Some animals have that type of vision. Birds, for example. But we have depth perception. This is how we create depth perception, is by putting all this information in different parts of your brain. If I were a horse, I'd have an eye here and I'd have an eye here. And this information from this eye would go back to this section, and the other part would go back here. If you cover up a horse's eye, if a horse goes blind in one eye, they can't run anymore. They won't be able to run. If you cover up one eye, they'll just stop. Because that half of their brain isn't getting any information, so they can't move. Or they won't move. Well, maybe they will. At the optic chiasm, the nasal optic nerves cross to the opposite hemisphere, and the temporal optic nerves stay on the same side. And for that reason, we're getting four different chunks of pictures. After the optic chiasm, the nerve pathways are known as the optic tracts. Most axons of the optic tract terminate in the lateral geniculate nucleus, the LGN, of the thalamus. From the LGN, the axons radiate into the primary visual cortex, the V1 of the occipital lobe. And the V1 is right in the middle of the occipital lobe. And this is where most of the information is translated, in that portion of your brain. So the thalamus that we weren't exactly sure what it did for the longest time, now we know that it is a switching station for information. And it does that with vision, it does that with smell, it does that with just about everything. The thalamus is the switching station. So things go into the thalamus, and then the thalamus sends it out into different places, wherever it needs to go. Primary visual cortex, for a normal subject. If you wear stimulus goggles, of course, well, I don't even know why I put this in here. This doesn't even make any sense. Well, as you can see, this is the optic, the occipital lobe. This is where all the information comes to, the visual information. So I think that's why I put it up there. The rest of that has to do with some kind of experiment that someone did. The primary visual cortex is sometimes called the striate cortex because of the striations that run through the area. Visual areas of the brain not in the striate cortex are known as the extrastriate cortex. Some axons of the optic tract send their axons to the superiorcolliculus, where the superiorcolliculus helps the eyes track rapid movements. I don't know if you've ever been around a dog. Is it the dog? If you drop something in front of a dog, they won't see it. Dogs track from left to right. So if you drop something in front of them, they won't see it drop. I know.
I've seen that.
Yeah, it's weird. Cats are really good at tracking things. Cats can sit, they almost put themselves in suspended animation. And since they're not moving, the rodent, the mouse or whatever, doesn't realize that they're there. So as soon as the mouse moves, of course, the cat jumps and catches it. But the mouse doesn't realize that it's there because it's not moving. But a cat, if you drop something in front of a cat, they won't track it either. As long as it's moving from side to side, the cat is extremely good at tracking it. But it can't track from up to down, as confusing as that is. The LGN is arranged in 6 layers. The outer 4 are the parvocellular layers, and the inner 2 are the magnocellular layers. P cells have small receptive fields, while the M cells have large receptive fields. M cells are sensitive to low contrast and rapid change. So a good hunter would have good M cells, because they would be able to tell the difference between contrast. Now, this is kind of weird because my wife and I, when we're driving down the road, a lot of times I'm not paying that much attention to the road. I'm looking to the side. I'm looking at whatever the hell's going on out there. And a lot of times I will see things like, oh, there's an eagle over there. Oh, there's a fox. Did you see the fox? My wife, who's also looking out and she doesn't see any of this stuff. She can't see it. I have to point it out to her before she can see it. And the difference is because, for one thing, I have really good eyesight, and she has really poor eyesight. But the other thing is that I can detect low intensity light, low contrast. So at night, I normally can see a deer or something out there, and she doesn't even come anywhere close. I mean, she has to hit it before she sees it, which drives me nuts. I mean, I'm constantly looking. I was second in the nation for deer strikes. Number 1 is West Virginia, but I was number 2. So there's a lot of deer out there, and they're always running across the road, dummies. And usually, if there's 1, there's 5. So it's real smart to keep your eyes open for deer. But my wife doesn't see them. She's hit. She hit one in Montana. Let's see. She hit a deer in Montana. She's hit 2 since we've lived in Iowa. So, and of course, when you hit a deer, it kills your car. It kills the deer, but it also kills your car. And then you have to get it fixed. About 10% of the retinal ganglion cells are M cells. 80% of the retinal ganglion cells are P cells. P cells require high contrast to be stimulated. P cells are relatively insensitive to rapid temporal change, such as a flicker. And this is one of the reasons, since we are, okay, so neither of you have your computer open, but computers are a flickering screen, and that's one of the reasons why it gives you a headache, because it's a flickering screen. But since we are looking directly at it and we are using our P cells, we can't see the flicker. Sometimes when you look away, you can see it. This is one of the reasons why they don't, and actually the screens are not as bad as they used to be. In the old days, they were a lot worse. So if you saw a computer screen on the television, and it actually was a computer screen that was turned on, it flickered. All you saw was a flicker. It looked like it was jumping. It's just so bizarre.
if you put a, would that be like, say, if you put it on, no, that doesn't work. Like if you put another camera, take another picture of the screen,
Right.
and then you can see the
You can see the flicker, yeah, you can see the lines on it, exactly. And that's because what you're looking at when you're looking at a computer screen, you're looking at it with your P cells. And your P cells can't pick up flickering, which is good because otherwise it would drive you crazy or it'd kick you into an epileptic fit. P cells are sensitive to different wavelengths of light and they therefore detect color. P cells have sustained responses. P cells have high acuity. Watch an old movie sometime. Yeah, go ahead and watch an old movie. Watch a movie from the 80s or the 90s where they actually had computers, but they weren't very sophisticated. And what you'll see is all the writing will be in green or all the writing will be in orange or something. But you'll see a lot of flipping.
War games?
Yeah, war games, exactly, exactly. You turn the thing on, and all you see is this flicker going on. So P cells are good. I mean, they detect color, they have high acuity, but they don't detect movement as readily. So an individual that is used to only see, well, this is what they do with glasses, and this is 2 summers ago. No, it's last summer. Was it last summer that I went to the optometrist? I went to the optometrist because I have to wear reading glasses. And I said, well, you know, all my brothers and sisters wear glasses. Why, maybe I should wear glasses too. And he said, well, I think you're right. So he looked at my eyes. He said, yeah, you got a little bit of a problem there. You need some, in order to see really well, then you need 150s. These are 150s. You need 150s. So I'm going to make you a pair of glasses. And he did. He made me a pair of glasses. And I put them on, and it gave me a headache. And the reason it gave me a headache is because the only area of the glasses that were at 150 was right in the middle of the vision. Just in the middle. Now I'm used to wearing, you know, reading glasses, where the entire lens is 150. So this is really clear for me. You know, what I'm looking at is really clear. But I can still see out here. This is fine. I can still see this. But what they did, they made only the middle of the glasses 150, and the rest of it was kind of fuzzy. So I couldn't see anything. It drove me nuts. And I took him back and I said, this is crazy. He said, well, you have to get used to them. I said, why the hell would you want to get used to being blind except in the middle of your visual field? He said, well, a lot of people like it that way. He was trying to force me into only being able to see in the middle of my visual field. It didn't make any sense to me at all. I thought it was nuts. I really feel sorry for you guys that have to wear glasses. Because you can only see in the middle of your visual field. You can't see out here. You can't tell what's going on out here. You know.
Yeah.
But of course it was a bad situation in my old office, the one I gave to Christine. The one I gave to Christine, and one of the reasons that I gave it up without any argument was because, first of all, well, I couldn't see the hallway. So people would sneak up on me. I mean, they didn't really mean to, but they'd come into my office, and I had a window up here. So unless they were really tall, I couldn't really see them coming in. So that was a little spooky. The other thing was I had a window up here, and I had a window behind me. So whatever happened in that window reflected off the window in front of me. So all of a sudden, I'm seeing crows fly by, you know, and it was going, oh my God, I'm being attacked by dive bombers or something. So it was a little spooky. I couldn't get anything done. I was constantly, yeah, exactly, trying to figure out if somebody was sneaking up behind me. Anyway, now I'm in an office. I can see the hallway. I don't have a window behind me. You know, that was. I don't know if you've ever been around military people. A lot of times they have to sit in a corner. They can't. They have to sit with their back to the wall. They have to face the door. They have to face the door.
Yeah, that's how my uncle is when he visits. He'll sit where the door's right here in front, and
Sure.
just stay in the corner.
Sure.
And whoever comes in,
So he can see everything, and he knows exactly what's going on. And he doesn't react negatively to anything. Hopefully he doesn't react negatively to anything. But that's what was going on. So I gave the guy back his glasses. I think he charged me $200 for the eye exam or something. I know, $243, and I'm going, I didn't get anything out of this except, yeah, I didn't get anything out of this at all. Here's V1. As you can see, it's right in the back. It's right in the middle, and that's where your phobia sees things. The primary visual cortex of the V1 is the first and most abundant area in the human brain. Neanderthal man had a big brain. He had a bigger brain than modern man does. But the area of his skull that was the largest was right in the back. So potentially his V1 cortex was much larger than ours. So maybe he had better eyesight than we had. Something killed them all off. We're not exactly sure. People with everybody in the world, including you guys, have Neanderthal DNA. You have Neanderthal DNA. Neanderthals came up from Africa, they went into the Middle East, then they went into Europe. So all the people that came after them have Neanderthal DNA. The only people in the world that don't have Neanderthal DNA are the people that are still in Africa, because the Neanderthals seem to have left. So that means all the Asians. Have you guys ever had Dr. Wang? Dr. Wang,
yeah.
Dr. Wang claims that he's a Navajo because he's Chinese, and he thinks you guys came from China. He's funny. Anyway, the reality is you do have Neanderthal DNA. And everybody that came out of Africa, everybody that left Africa has Neanderthal DNA. That includes all the peoples of the Americas that we've checked, all the Micronesians, all the Macronesians, all the Polynesians, everybody except people that live in Africa today. Now the interesting thing is, one of the ways you can tell if somebody has white ancestry, if they're African, if they're of African descent, is by checking their Neanderthal DNA. Because people from Africa don't have Neanderthal DNA, but anybody that left Africa does have Neanderthal DNA. I know, how confusing is this? So Barack Obama, despite the fact that his father was Kenyan, his mother was white, so he has Neanderthal DNA, as did she, of course, because she was white. As interesting as that is. I don't know why I'm talking about genetics. From the V1, the stimulus is farmed out to other areas of the brain depending on what part of the eye the stimulus comes from. Areas are designated from V1 to V5, and you can see all of them. No, it only goes up to V3 on this picture. Do you see a 4?
Yeah, at the bottom.
At the bottom is a V4? VP.
That's a VP, V2B, V1, V2D, V3. I don't see a V4.
I don't see a V4 either. Oh well. We'll assume that they know what they're talking about. Let's pretend they know what they're talking about. Researchers have discovered that there are three different kinds of cones. Cones that are sensitive to short wavelengths only, cones that are sensitive to long wavelengths only, and cones that are sensitive to the middle wavelengths. So there's three different types of cones. Now each one, of course, is going to see different colors, each type of wavelength. Of the middle wavelength cones, some are more sensitive to the higher ranges of middle. Some middle range cones are more sensitive to the lower range of middle. There are twice as many long wavelength cones, reds, as middle wavelength cones, greens and yellows. Short wavelength cones are the fewest, blue and purple. And this is maybe one of the reasons why the most popular color in the world, are you ready for this? Most popular color in the world is red. Because everybody can see it. They have more cones, they react to it more. So a lot of people really like red. Tons of people really like red. Most popular color in the world, except on the Navajo reservation where the most popular color is black.
Black.
Francis. There he is with a black shirt. And yeah, there we go. Hope's got a black vest on. Everything is black and gray. What was I was watching it, a couple people were walking in front of me. And they had, it was dark gray. They were wearing dark gray. And I was thinking, they could be twins. I mean, both of these individuals had exactly the same color sweatshirt on. Of course, they didn't have anything to do with each other, but they were wearing gray. I mean, and if you wander around, if I had a whole classroom full of people, most people would be in either black or gray.
And it's like that at the school too, the high school.
Yeah.
I see nothing but black, and I'm like, wow, everybody wears black.
It doesn't make any sense to me. And that's one of the reasons I hate to drive in Chinle at night. There's people crossing the street and they've got on black. I would yell at Margaret the other day, Margaret Meyer. I hardly ever get to yell at her. But I was yelling at her the other night. She was walking her dog and she had on a dark blue shirt and a dark red skirt. She was invisible. I mean, it was dusk. She was totally invisible. If I had needed to drive down there, I would have run right over her, but I couldn't see her. She was invisible. So I yelled at her that I couldn't see her because of her dark clothes. She yelled back at me. Margaret likes to be in charge of everything, all the time. She's funny. Myopia is a condition where the eyeball is elongated, causing the image to focus in front of the retina, causing a blurred image. And this is the way it looks. Everything is blurred. It's very difficult to tell what you're looking at. There's some evidence that nearsightedness is caused when children look at images too close to their face. This was the complaint about television. Children used to get right up on television. Of course, televisions were a lot smaller than they are today. But we may be causing nearsightedness because of televisions, as odd as that may seem.
And what about, I have a question. And what about children that are like on the phone? Like when they're on the phones? I mean, little kids, like 3 years old, 4 years old.
Same thing.
Yeah. So
They hold it right next to their faces, don't they?
like this.
Yeah. But see, they can do that. I can't do that. I have to hold it way out here in order to see it.
Yeah.
I actually have to put my glasses on to see it. But, you know, they can see things right up next to their faces. But what they're doing is they're training their eyes to see incorrectly, is what they're doing.
And could that do something to their eye, you know, like...
Make them cross-eyed?
Yeah. Because they're looking like this.
Well, usually that's not permanent. It hurts too much. It's too painful to look cross-eyed at something. It just hurts. So the closer it is to your face, the more painful it is. The muscles of your eyes have to work too hard. And so normally you will back something off until it's comfortable.
I know they have some like training, those vision training, eye training. I don't know.
Is this for walleye?
Why?
They'll put a patch over one eye so that you forces
Yeah.
your bad eye to strengthen. It strengthens your good eye.
I've seen that before.
Yeah. See, the human body wants to be symmetrical. It wants the right side to be just as strong as the left side. So what will happen if you have one strong eye and one weak eye? Then the strong eye will dominate, and the weak eye will get weaker. So what they try to do is they try to force the weak eye to strengthen itself by covering the good eye. It's not normally what happens. This is what myopia looks like. As you can see, the image on top is getting fuzzier and fuzzier and fuzzier. And that's what myopia is. Yeah, there we go, okay. Myopia can be prevented by only allowing reading in adequate lighting, and of course that's kind of interesting. In the old days, of course, before they had good lights, when they were reading by candlelight or whatever, they ruined a lot of eyes. So people that read a lot in the old days, they would need glasses. So one of the ways that you could tell if somebody was an academic or not was whether you wore glasses or not. When I first started going to college, I have perfect eyesight. As it turns out, I have perfect eyesight. As a matter of fact, they tried to recruit me into flying helicopters when I was in the military. Before I joined the Air Force, I went down and took my ASVAB test, and my eyesight was perfect. It was 2010, so they were trying to get me to be a helicopter pilot. Why am I talking about this? What?
Eyesight.
Eyesight. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, now I can't remember what it was. I had a point and I didn't remember what it was. Anyway, it was a good story, and you guys missed it. Sorry, because I can't remember it. Oh, bright light. That's what it is. Bright light. So in the so when I first started college, almost all the professors everybody wore glasses. They didn't have. This is before contacts were real pop. They were too expensive. They were hard glass, and people didn't like to put them in their heads because sometimes they'd wander off into into your optic orb somewhere, and they'd have to have surgery to have them taken out. So then, yeah, not a whole lot of people were wearing contact lenses. Just about everybody was wearing glasses. So they didn't. If you didn't wear glasses, they didn't think that you were a serious scholar, and this continued into the 70s and 80s and 90s. And so when I was getting my graduate degrees, if I had to talk to a professor, then a lot of times I had trouble because then they would see that I didn't wear glasses and they didn't think that I was a serious scholar. So that was really kind of weird. And it still happens today. There are some individuals that aren't exactly sure I'm a real professor because I don't wear glasses. And everybody knows that all professors wear glasses. So it's kind of interesting. When people see me, they don't think I'm a serious scholar because I don't look like one. Now, it can't have anything to do with height, can't have anything to do with anything else. It has to do with it's glasses. It's pure and simple glasses. But I don't wear glasses because I can see better without them, unless I'm reading, of course. So I don't know. I had a problem with getting my PhD because the chair of my committee was this Hispanic guy who had the thickest glasses I've ever seen. They were like bottoms of bottles, Coke bottles. And I was fine. We were doing fine, and then all of a sudden I had to go visit him. He lived north of Albuquerque, and I had to go visit him. And we had a long conversation, and he kept looking at me like there was something wrong, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And then afterwards, all of a sudden, he refused to do anything to help me with anything. Before if I made an error, he was correcting it. After that, I had to figure out what he was thinking. It was one of those kind of situations. He just completely dropped me. So it took me a little bit longer to finish my PhD, and I think it had to do with the fact that I didn't wear glasses. I'm also relatively athletic, but you wouldn't think that, well, see, that's a prejudice as well. He was kind of a dumpy guy. Looked like he was the kind of guy that took the elevator instead of walked the stairs. His muscle tone was non-existent. I don't know. Anyway, that's the end of chapter, whatever that is. Chapter 8 or 9. Sorry about that. I don't mean to be. There's obviously something wrong with me.
So you go to your doctor's when you were in Albuquerque?
No, where was I? I was up in Montana. I had to fly down to Albuquerque to see this guy.
Oh, really?
He was in a little village north of Albuquerque.
Bernalillo?
It had a really strange Spanish name.
Charles.
He was He was a school counselor. School counselor.
Maybe he read you or something.
There was something wrong with him, obviously. He didn't like me. There was obviously something wrong with him. So then they assigned a reader to my dissertation committee, and I had met this guy before, my reader, and I'd had an argument with him, and we almost got into a fist fight. And I normally don't get into, I'm not a fighter. I'm just not a fighter. But we almost got into a fist fight. And so he wasn't going to let me get my PhD. And the school, and I complained to the school, and the school asked him why, and he didn't have any reason. So he had to give me my PhD. So he's a little bit pissed off. And then guess who came here for HLC? The first year I was here. Same guy, yeah. The guy I almost had a fist fight with, who wouldn't give me my PhD because of something. I don't know what it was. Really? Is that what motor? Is it plasticity? Motor controlled plasticity. Okay. Muscles cover the skeletal system and provide movement. They also provide protection for the organs that lie underneath. So we need our muscles. We need our muscles to protect us. Last Christmas, just before I came back, I started having pains in my side. And I went to it was so severe that I thought I was having an appendicitis. Well, appendicitis will kill you if you're not careful, especially an old fart like me. So I went to the emergency room and I said, I got a pain in my lower right quadrant, which is where your appendix is. And the pain was there. I mean, it was really, really severe. And so they looked at everything, and they took me to, they gave me a CAT scan and whatnot. And he said, I don't see anything there. There is some bruising in the area. What had happened, my dog had stepped on me while I was asleep. And because I didn't tighten my muscles before he stepped on me, he bruised my intestines. Damn dog.
Why do people pick on you while you're asleep?
Because it's easier? Oh, you mean the knife? Okay, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. One time when I was growing up, my sister came up, and I was asleep on the couch, and she picked up a wastebasket and slammed it down on my leg. I still remember that to this day. You know, I used to have fights with my brothers and sisters all the time, but this is what I remember, the fact that she hit me while I was asleep. And it hurt, but it wasn't the pain. It was being awakened from a dead sleep that really shocked me. I mean, it was a horror. You know, now that it's Halloween, you know, I can still feel the edge of that wastebasket coming down, because it's got that sharp edge on it.
Wastebaskets were metal back then, right?
They were metal back then. They certainly were, and they had a rim on the bottom of them. And she just clocked me, and she, it's got a rim about this tall, so it made a dent in my leg about that size. Anyway, so I wasn't protecting my abdomen, and the dog stepped on me while I was asleep, and he bruised my intestines because I didn't have I wasn't tightening up my muscles. As he did it, I tightened up my muscles, of course, but by that time the damage was already done. Normally, one of the things that, if you work in the emergency room, a lot of times one person will stab another person. But normally, if they are awake, they can tighten their muscles up, and it changes the depth and the direction of the knife. I know.
Because you sticked him.
Sure. So a lot of times what will happen is organs will move out of the way, because knives don't go in that fast. I mean, even if you jab somebody, it's still, is not going in nearly as rapidly as a bullet does. And one of the reasons bullets do so much damage is because they go in so rapidly that your organs don't have a chance to scoot out of the way. But a knife goes in relatively slowly. A lot of times they'll just scoot out of the way. They're kind of slippery anyway. If you've ever tried to grab a hold of somebody's intestines, they slip out of your hands. Or tried to pick up a stomach, it takes a couple times before you can grab it. I'm sorry, I've done autopsies and you don't know what I'm talking about. Okay. Especially if they're alive. If they're dead, of course, it's a totally different story. How muscles attach to the bones is an indication of the type of movement that they perform. Muscles only provide force when they contract, when they tighten up. So people with big muscles is because they have contracted muscles. That's why their muscles are large. Okay. So if you have a contracted muscle, if you have a smaller muscle, if you have an enlarged muscle, you have a bicep that's nice and big, you lose your flexibility. It decreases your flexibility because you're already contracted. Okay. Some muscles maintain body posture. Some muscles produce movement around a joint. Any movement that occurs in the body is performed by muscles. All movement is performed by muscles. Muscles are connected to bones by tendons, and of course you can injure your tendons, and that's something you don't want to do. If you do injure a tendon, it has to be reattached, and usually you have to do that by using surgery. Around a joint there are two sets of muscle groups. When one group contracts, the other extends. These muscles are known as antagonists, and a good example of an antagonist would be your arm muscles, your biceps, which are on top, and your triceps, which are underneath. So when you tighten up when you make a muscle, and you make your bicep large, it's contracted, these are relaxing. Your triceps are relaxing. So if you straighten out your arm and tighten your triceps out, your bicep is relaxed. Okay, they're antagonists. One works when the other one doesn't. This is one of the reasons if you want to build your arm muscles, then you can do push-ups. Because push-ups, when you push up, that contracts your triceps, and when you allow yourself to go down, then that contracts your biceps, and your triceps will relax.
What if you dislocate your shoulder? Or
Ouch.
Yeah, because my daughter did that. She was playing basketball. She dislocated her arm.
Sure.
So I think she tore like her...
The tendons around her, yeah. You have all these tiny little tendons.
Yeah. So when she went to go, we went through surgery. Because it tore. So we had to kind of not sew it back, but kind of flip it back. So,
And the rehab took forever.
yeah.
Shoulder muscles, and the rehab is horrible. It takes forever. First of all, you have to keep it immobilized for like 6 months. It's horrible. Shoulder surgery is very debilitating because you can't do anything with that shoulder for 6 months. You can't do anything at all. Yeah, it took 6 months to rehab. And she's still probably not 100%.
She's still breathing. It's about a year now. So what kind of problems is she going to have later?
Shoulders are tough. Shoulders they're horrible. It's a horrible joint. It's just terrible because if you injure, you got rotator cuff in there, you got all these tendons, these tiny little tendons, and this is the movement for your shoulders, and it goes against the bone. I mean, literally, it goes against the bone. So somebody that does something like pitches, where they're constantly pitching, underarm is okay because you never bring your arm above your shoulder. Yeah. So if you pitch, you're never hyperextending your shoulder. But if you're a baseball pitcher and you're coming over, So now you have to bring your arm up here. Yeah, that's terrible. It's a terrible movement. It's just the hardest thing in the world.
So she was walking like this, or she would have to lay it on the wall.
And somebody
the girl
blocked
just-
it?
Yeah, one girl just came and just. Oh no, she came from behind.
Oh, pushed her from behind.
Pushed her
Oh,
from behind.
yeah. See, if she'd been coming from in front of her, then she would have seen her and she would have prepared herself for what was going to happen next. But because she came in from behind, she blindsided her. Yeah, she wasn't prepared for the blow.
Yeah.
Because her muscles were relaxed.
Right, yeah. She couldn't tighten up to prepare herself for the blow. And for that reason, that movement, you know, everything was going this way, and when she hit her from behind, it just pushed her shoulder right out of socket.
Yeah.
That's how I had a foot injury. Not injury, but it's just like the wrong pairs of shoes I was wearing. It just made my foot like, I don't know. So I had to go to the eye chest and get it checked, and they were saying it was like your muscles on here. It's just too much pounding on it, so they gave me like a
Orthotic.
yeah, and now it's like the muscles. It was hard to walk. It was painful, even at work.
Plantar fasciitis is what
That is, yes. And she made me doing like a simple muscle strengthening on the stairs, stretching, grabbing the wall and just pushing it forward. Get a towel on the floor, just pick it up with your feet. Stuff like that, muscles, and it came back, you know. I mean,
But it
went
took
away.
forever.
Yeah, like 3 months. But you know, after it went away, you know, I still have the
It healed is what happens.
Yeah. So it was.
A bad pair of shoes can ruin your feet forever.
Yeah.
You've got to be really careful. I always buy not expensive shoes, but shoes that I know will not hurt my feet. I don't wear shoes that are too small. Well, of course I ran track, so I'm really sensitive about my feet, and I want them to always, you know, be in comfortable shoes. I can't wear boots. I can't wear cowboy boots. So you don't have cowboy boots on anyway. I can't wear cowboy boots because they're just too. I don't know. I have a wide foot. My toe box is really wide, so I'm like a double E.
Like a hobbit. Yeah.
I'm like a hobbit, exactly. But I've got a good arch.
Yeah.
My wife has a high arch, so her feet are shaped really funny. So the top of her foot always hits on the top of the shoe, and that's not very comfortable. So she needs an arch support in order to support her arches. I don't have that problem.
I used to wear a lot of flats, flat shoes, the ones that don't even have
Sure.
any. So that kind of ruined my feet, because you're walking flat. And I became flat, and then some.
But see, all men they never wear anything but flats. The problem is that you have worn high heels. That's the problem. When you're wearing high heels, you're not really walking on your foot, you're walking on your toes. Okay.
I think that's how, because since a young age to a couple of years before I started school here, it was always work boots I would wear.
Right.
And then when I started going to school, all that kind of went away, and after more like sitting, and my shoes changed from tennis shoes to stuff that were really thin.
Right.
And I think that change right there threw me under. So I'm thinking and then I stopped wearing boots. I stopped wearing work shoes. And,
They don't give you enough support. They're not soft enough. I have a pair of, I wear gym shoes because I have to walk all the way from the fob all the way over to here. When I wore my regular shoes, my brown shoes, my good shoes, I wasn't getting enough cushion. So I had to start wearing gym shoes. If I didn't wear, I'm wearing red today, but if I didn't wear gym shoes, I couldn't walk across campus. Well, I could, but Sometimes I have to go back and forth 2 or 3 times. So I'd be hobbled, I wouldn't be able to function.
Well, maybe that's what it was my heels. I wore heels knees when I was working. Probably about 2-inch heels. So I think that's probably what burned mine.
Yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm.
I had an aunt who, she was actually my cousin, but she was this old lady that always wore mules. Mules are high-heeled slippers. But she always wore them, and she would even have to wear them in the shower because she couldn't put her foot flat down on the ground. She had been in high heels for such a long time, for almost all of her life, that it had shortened her muscles. She had contracted the muscles in her calves to the extent that she couldn't put her heels down flat on the floor. So if she tried to take a shower, if they took off her shoes and didn't give her high heels to wear, she couldn't walk. She'd have to try to walk around on the foot. So she had to take a shower in mules and high-heeled slippers. As stupid as that is. Why do we do these things to ourselves? She did it because it made her calves look attractive. How important are attractive calves? Well, as far as she was concerned, it was worth doing something horrible to their bodies. Muscle groups that act together to perform the same act are known as synergists. So your biceps and triceps are synergists. Muscles are made of thousands of fibers. These muscle fibers are made up of 2 kinds of filaments, thick and thin filaments arranged in a regular pattern. Thick filaments are made of myosin, and the thin filaments are made of actin. Okay, that's what they look like. This is smooth muscle, and this is striated muscle. This is what all the muscle in your body looks like. You don't have to be a weightlifter. All you have to do is exercise to some extent, and you get fairly extensive striated muscles. There are 2 basic types of muscles, the smooth muscles. These contract in an automatic fashion without human control, and they're regulated by the autonomic nervous system. Your heart muscles, your digestive system, the muscles in your digestive system are all smooth muscles. So you're constantly digesting food. Your heart is constantly beating, and that's because they're smooth muscles, and that's a good thing. If you get stressed out, your digestion will stop. These muscles will stop working. So if you're under stress for an extended length of time, one of the things that happens is you lose your appetite. The reason you lose your appetite is because you've already got food in your stomach. You don't want to throw that food up either because it's been in there for a while. It's been sitting on all that acid. You really don't want that stuff to come up. Anyway, okay, so this is one of the reasons to try to relieve stress as soon as possible. The other type of muscles are striated muscles, primarily supporting the skeletal system. They're keeping you upright. They're allowing you to be able to move and do whatever you need to do. Since different muscles perform different tasks, each requires different speeds, precision, strength, and endurance. Endurance is really kind of interesting. One of the things that we discovered is that all people have fast twitch and slow twitch muscle fibers. If you have a lot of slow twitch muscle fibers, you have a lot of endurance, and you can run long distances without getting tired, without getting as tired. If you are a sprinter, you have fast twitch muscles. So the more fast twitch muscles you have, the faster you can run, the better you can respond to moving very rapidly. So we have fast twitch and slow twitch muscles. Eye movement must be quick to follow the movement of speeding objects, but only for short periods of time. And of course, this is extraocular muscles are fast muscle fibers. They have to move very rapidly so that you can adjust to movement. Fast muscle fibers react promptly and strongly. They fatigue very rapidly. They are used when muscle tension must change frequently. So when I walk up the stairs from the 2nd floor, and I'm on the 5th floor, I can feel the lactic acid in my muscles because most of my muscles are fast twitch muscles. I don't have a lot of endurance, unfortunately. I can run about a half a marathon, and that's about it. if I tried to run a marathon, I probably wouldn't make it. But then again, I've got a lot of joint damage too, so that can be a problem. But I don't have a lot of endurance. And the reason is because most of my muscles are fast twitch muscles. So when I was in college and when I was in high school and I was running, I was a good sprinter. And I could sprint for about a quarter of a mile, which doesn't seem like that far, but when you're doing it, it seems like a really long distance. Anyway, so I was a quarter mile, a middle distance runner. Slow muscle fibers have greater resistance to fatigue. They're used mainly to maintain posture. So your slow muscle fibers and your slow twitch muscles give you endurance. Let me make sure I don't go over. I'm okay. Muscles react to stimulus coming in other motor neurons. From motor neurons, the axon will split into many branches and activate many muscle fibers. As the axon is activated, it releases the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. And acetylcholine, once again, we've got acetylcholine. It allows us to remember things. It allows us to move. So acetylcholine is extremely important. It's an extremely important neurotransmitter. And this is one of the reasons why Alzheimer's disease is so debilitating, because it destroys the acetylcholine producing cells in your brain, and because of that you lose your memory. But the other thing that happens to you that people don't talk about is the fact that now you don't move as much as you did before. And eventually you will curl up and die because you can't move anymore. I had an aunt that died of Alzheimer's disease. It took her 9 years to die. But she didn't stimulate her brain very much. She's not a real bright lady. Or maybe she could have been, but she just didn't want to. I have a sister like that, and I'm afraid something's going to happen with my sister. That she's going to start losing her memory because she never stimulates herself. Didn't sound right, but she doesn't. When she watches television, she watches crap television that she's seen before. Why in the world are you watching this thing over and over and over again? Why do you do that? So her stimulation is mostly physical stimulation. She crochets. The other, about 2 years ago, she called me up on the phone and she wanted to know what I used for memory, because she was starting to lose her memory. And so I told her some of the tricks that I use to keep my memory sharp. L-carnitine, ginkgo biloba. These increase the blood circulation in the brain. These chemicals. And I told her what it was. It's not going to work though if she doesn't try to stimulate her brain. This is a lady that hadn't read a book in years because too lazy, I guess. I don't know. And she's probably going to come down with Alzheimer's disease one of these days. She's older than I am, so we'll see. She's my last sister. Oh well. I'm going to outlive all my brothers and sisters. I'm going to be the last one, the last survivor. You'll see. I'll be the last one. Uh-oh, it's almost time. It is time. Why don't we stop right here? We'll pick this up next time. Acetylcholine, the most important substance in your body.